welcome to another Tale of Woe. I am your storyteller Tim, and today we're going to delve into the expedition to the Barrier Peaks. The expedition to the Barrier Peaks is one of my favorite original Dungeons and Dragons modules. This is actually one that was written by Gary Gygax. And for those of you that don't know what this is about, it is actually a adventure where all the sci-fi elements, or a lot of sci-fi elements, come into it. The expedition to the Barrier Peaks revolves around the players finding a mysterious metal labyrinth hidden deep within a mountain range known as the Barrier Peaks. And every few years, the Duchy of Jeff, as it is known, gets attacked by all of these weird and mysterious animals that no one has ever seen before. No one knows where they came from. They know that they're not Fey in origin, and they know they're not demonic. These are just these incredibly bizarre and strange creatures. And every few years, almost like clockwork, the Duchy of Jeff is plagued by these monsters, and so the Duke Jeff, he goes about and hires the group of adventurers to travel to the Barrier Peaks and find out what the hell is going on. Wants to put an end to this once and for all. And he knows that he sent adventurers already to into the peaks, and they have discovered that there is a cave with a metal door in it. And every few years, this door will open, and all of the monsters will flood out through this door, and then it will seal shut. And you can't, and no one that has ever gone into this mysterious door has ever returned. And so he hires the adventurers to basically try and solve his problem for him. And what the adventurers will discover beyond this door is the remains of a crashed spaceship, or an element of a crashed spaceship. And so all of these weird and wonderful creatures that are actually coming and invading his duchy are aliens. And so that is what this adventure is. And it is really, really cool. The aesthetic is very like 1970s, 1980s robots. Actually, it reminds me quite a lot of the Disney movie The Black Hole, if you've ever seen that. All the robots are well. There's different forms of robots, different constructs in there. They're sort of cylindrical with weird tentacle arms that come out of them. But one of the probably the most famous items that you can get from this adventure is actually a suit of power armor. But through like researching and running through this whole thing, one of the things that I thought was really cool was that Veggie Pygmies and the Frog Hemoth. Where is he? There he is. The Frog Hemoth. Come from this module. They're not actually native to the realm of Greyhawk or whatever realm it is that you're playing in. They're actually from the Barrier Peaks, and I believe in more recent updated editions, I think 5th edition, I believe the Barrier Peaks are actually located somewhere in the jungles of Cholts. I may be wrong, but that is what I've come to understand, because there are a lot of Froghemoths and there are a lot of Veggie Pygmies in the land of Cholt. So if that is where they originated from, then that is where the Barrier Peaks are actually located. The adventurers can find a whole stack of weird and wonderful things, but this is one of the modules that I believe was actually written as a tournament module. Tournament modules, if you are unaware, were modules where you would go to a convention and they were essentially character meat grinders. There wasn't a lot of roleplay involved, but it was just a hell of a lot of monsters that you'd run through. So like on the entire first floor of the ship, the entire place is covered like almost every room in this place is covered in veggie pygmies, and there are also the different police robots. If you go and you meet up with, if you find the medical bay, the medical robot will actually, no matter what you are, whatever you say to it, it will try and grab you and shove you on the desk and attempt to dissect whoever is actually going into the medical bay. If you find the science lab, there's like all different powders that you'll find in there, and some of them are poisons that will just instantly wipe you out. And it's like a Constitution save at like -20 or something like that. Just absolutely insane module. There are 5 floors to this thing. You have the primary crew deck with all the different quarters. The second level is like an observation deck with a massive arboretum and an interior jungle that is in there. You'll find a whole heap of weird and wonderful things. Probably one of my favorite creatures, which I've never seen a modern update for, is a creature known as the wolf in sheep's clothing. It is it's literally a stump. It's a stump, a tree stump with a bunch of like roots that go on out of it, and a little rabbit that sits on top of the stump. But the rabbit and the stump are actually one creature. The idea is that the rabbit will lure in other predators, and then when you get close to it, the roots spring to life, the stump opens up its mouth, and it will envelop you. There are bats that fly through the place that shoot gases that are poisonous, and if you shoot, or if you manage to kill one of the bats, they explode, producing even more gas. There's a lake in the center of the arboretum area that is filled with, which actually has the froghemoth, which is where it comes from. There are different like eating establishments with servitor robots that will attempt to force feed the food and just shove the food down your throat. But it is like I said, it's an absolutely insane module, but it is really cool. I think there's like a beholder or an eyes in the deep, so like an aquatic beholder in the swimming pool. You'll find a bunch of workout robots. There's like a gymnast robot. There's a fencing robot, and a kung fu robot. So, and they'll attempt to fight you in their various ways. And there's even a what are they called? A mind flayer. And this was also because, as part of Spelljammer, mind flayers are actually aliens. They don't actually originate from the planet, at least originally. They have their own planet, and so this mind flayer had actually infiltrated on board of the spaceship before it crashed, and so he is there trapped. And so if you attempt to if you come across him, he will attack you or attempt to eat your brains because he's been starving and unable to find his way off. And as the players move their way through this this ship, and they manage to get through to the end, they'll discover that the reason that monsters keep getting escaped onto or loose onto the duchy is because that every year or so there is a glitch or a power surge in the computer which which triggers the unloading procedure. This vessel was essentially like an interstellar arc, and the section that the players find themselves on isn't actually the whole ship. It's just a module of the ship that was ejected out because the veggie pygmy disease is like this fungus that had infested the ship, and because they were unable to cure it, they had to sever that part of the ship, and that ship fell to Earth or whatever planet they're on. So back to what they discovered is that every few years this power surge occurs and resets the computer, which triggers the unloading procedure. So they the servo bots open up the cargo bay and start dumping out a whole series of the cargo containers, which have various animals in them, and then all these animals run rampant throughout the Duchy of Jeff. And so, if the players can make their way all the way through, they'll discover a whole stack of, like, they'll discover laser weaponry, power armor, a scuba suit, hypo sprays for healing, just a whole bunch of really really awesome bits and pieces that you cannot get anywhere else. One of the cooler things too is that they've actually created a modern day equivalent, I suppose you would say, which is the Lost Laboratory of Qualsh, and this also revolves around a spaceship which is hovering above an active volcano, which has actually become a temple. And Qualsh is a gnome artificer or adventurer who has taken it upon himself to research this. And if you can track down his laboratory, it actually has an updated version of the power armor in it that he has been working on, as well as a bunch of other bits and pieces. So the Lost Laboratory of Qualsh is like the spiritual successor to the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks in 5th edition D&D. But so that is the summary of what this adventurer is. But this is how I utilized it for the beginning. So if you are uninterested in finding out what is going on in the beginning, you can quit now. Thank you. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. But for those of you that are interested, that is the review portion. Now we have the story portion. So after removing the Stone of Corbinet, the adventurers made their way to the Barrier Peaks to attempt to locate Wallflower and Selena's mother. I'd taken the expedition to the Barrier Peaks as a basis. I really liked the map. I really liked the concept, and I essentially just ran my own story using the maps for the spaceship. So it was still a crashed spaceship, but it was a very different scenario than the one that was actually provided in the book. When they approach the ship through the cave, they find that it almost looks like it's underwater. There's they see the cave, they see the same door, but they see like this weird effect, this weird watery effect, as high up as they can see into this cave, and they notice that there are like insects that are just frozen still, like mid-flight, inside this weird effect. And one of the ideas that I'd messed around with for a while, I thought this would just be like a weird science fiction thing. It probably would never work. But if you could, via interstellar space, rather than like cryogenics or whatnot, which probably be a lot simpler, but if you could somehow manipulate time and slow down the speed which time within the spaceship travels, the ship could travel at normal speed. It wouldn't need to travel faster than light. It could travel at regular speed through space until it got to its destination. The people within the ship would experience the flow of time incredibly slowly, and so by the time that they got to their destination, outside of the ship it's been like, a few million years or whatever, but for them it's maybe been, say, 20 years. So this was an idea that I thought would be interesting. I don't know whether or not anyone else had ever come up with it before. I'm sure someone has and has proven that it's ridiculous, but for this fantasy scenario, that was the idea that I decided would be happening with this ship. So in order to travel through interstellar space, they had developed a time drive, which slowed down the passage of time and allowed them to travel through interstellar space, getting to their destination while the crew were still alive. This ship was... anyway, so I'll explain that as it becomes relevant. So the ship is crashed, but the time drive is still active. So time has progressed slower inside the field than what it has outside the field. And so once they finally got over their paranoia about sorry, just swatting a fly away. Once they got rid of their paranoia about wanting to go into this thing, they get up to it, and Nuru has the engineering key card which they found in King Katsuki's grave, and she swipes the key card, and the door opens, and they are allowed entry into the ship. Once they get inside, the door immediately closes behind them, and there is no way to open the door from the inside. So they are committed until they finish this particular aspect of the story, which was a bit of a pain in the ass, but it was also a trap, which was a trap by Rick, because he wanted them out of the way and not interfering with his scenario. So the longer that they are in the ship, the more time travels you see outside of it. So by the time that they escape from the vessel, a lot of time has passed. They make their way through the vessel, and they do eventually come across Selena and Wallflower's mother, and there is a very heartfelt reunion, but it is not without danger, as it were, because this level of the ship was the recreation area. She'd only been in the ship for a week. She had 30 years had gone by since she had entered on the outside world. It had only been a week for her, and she was cowering in the corner. But in the next room was extreme danger, for it was in fact the Mind Flayer. And the Mind Flayer was sitting in a room with a bunch of the intellect devourers, the brains on legs, as well as a mysterious egg, and it was sitting in this pool waiting to see what would happen. And when the party comes across him, he leaps naked out of the pool and begins to attack them with his disintegration gun, as well as all of the other different elements with the intellect devourers. The party was also accosted by the different androids, because they were in the rec center. So they were attacked by the weightlifting android, the sword fighting android, and the workout android, the aerobics instructor android. And so, like, the aerobics instructor android is trying to get them to work out, like manipulating the body, so they get constantly grappling checks. The fencing robot is trying to do fencing. Oh, that was the other one. The boxing one. There's actually a boxing instructor, as well as I believe a karate instructor. So essentially, they're fighting a robot Goliath, a robot monk, another Goliath type that actually throws the weights at them, because it goes, here, you need to, and I use the voices of like 19, it goes, see, now, yeah, I like the cutting edge jab, now here, catch, and he throws the weight at them, so they're having to like dodge the, being attacked with these massive barbells, as well as being sword fighted by this person, and kung fu chopped, and all sorts of stuff. So it was quite a shit show, but they managed to get their way through that without too much hassle, and then reunite with Wallflowers and Selena's mother, and it was all a very heartfelt moment. One of the things that they found that they needed to do, and I had recently started watching, I should just finished, I should say, the original season of Altered Carbon. And so I had an idea in my head where it would be interesting if, rather than having the bodies of the crew, at least for the most part, if you had a chip installed in the back of your head which backed up your brain, and then as the crew went off shift, as it were, they had biological blanks that they could download themselves into. These were what I decided were actually doppelgangers. So the ship itself has a massive store of doppelgangers in its bio labs, and if you get yourself chipped, you can immediately take your chip out, install it into a blank, and then immediately it'll code your DNA in. The blank will form into the your original form, and its continuity is maintained. And so that was so a few of the players decided to do that, and that was where they met up with Emma, which was the nurse robot in the medical center, which, as Emma was emergency medical assistant, EMA, and Surge, the surgical robot. And so they and rather than make it this thing will just instantly dissect them, this thing actually was able to do large amounts of. It was actually able to do surgery. This thing actually healed them. So that was one element of it that I didn't pick up on, because I thought that was just really really cruel, and also I wanted them to have these chips installed in their head. The other thing that having the chip granted them was it gave them the enhancement. So if they didn't have dark vision already, it actually gave them night vision, as well as giving them the ability to read whatever languages were on board the ship. It gave them basically an instantaneous information dump. They could access maps of the vessel, provided that they were in range of the AI system, which I will get to next. And it also provided them with languages, maps, and also if someone had another chip installed in them, it gave you like a little heads-up display, so it actually their name would appear above their head. If they had a chip installed, so it was just a way for them to navigate the ship a little bit better. One of the things that Emma had explained to them was that her database was incomplete because Darius was no longer networked up them, and Darius was another acronym. It stood for Data Analyzing Robotics Utility System. And he was the ship's AI, and he became quite an integral part of the story. Again, I had played around with the idea of making him malevolent, or he was the reason why the ship crashed. But no, that was the Hell 9000 had been played out, I thought, quite a bit. But that was the voice that I used for him. So it was, "Hello, crewman Nuru. How may I assist you?" Which was a lot of fun to actually play. So they managed to get their way past the security robots into. So once they had the chips installed as well, because one of the things they were having to deal with was the security robots were on constant patrol and attacking them at every turn. Once they got the chips installed, they counted as being registered crew members, and because they had the chips installed, they could roam the ship without the security robots attacking them. The other option they could take, because a few of them weren't really happy about getting themselves chipped, I believe Geeve didn't want to be chipped. In fact, Geeve hated being in this part of the campaign, so much so that he actually found a room that was actually filled with different arcade machines, and just proceeded to smash the shit out of them because he was bored. So you can't always please everyone with your campaign story hooks, I guess. And he actually took a break from the campaign until the rest of the group left the ship. So once so a few of the players kept on going because they were because we had Nuru and Wallflower, so it became the Adventures of Nuru and Wallflower again, and Pity, of course. So anyway, so Darius needed to have his network reinstalled, so that just involved them wandering around and dropping bunches of nanites around to help reestablish his network connection and help do the repairs, because his network connectors have been damaged in the what am I looking for? His network connectors had been damaged in the crash. Once he had been reconnected. This is where the main drive of the campaign came in, or at least this section of it, is that the engines were still running and they were overheating and were getting ready to explode. So they had to descend through the ship in order to find out what was wrong with the ship and shut it down. Now, one thing I should mention, which I didn't mention before, was that something that they discovered while they after they defeated the what's the word I'm looking for? Once they defeated not the intellect devourer. Well, they defeated the intellect devourers, the mind flayer. The egg that he had been sitting in the pool with was actually a xenomorph egg. I'd actually come across the rules for xenomorphs in for D&D, and I thought it'd be interesting to run. Really, all I did was I just made them black dragons because, spitting acid. But if you hit them, you had to make a dexterity check or suffer 1d4 acid damage every time you hit them. So it wasn't as vicious as what it could have been. What the players discover as they descend through the ship, when they get to the arboretum deck, they manage to avoid the what's the word I'm looking for? The wolf in sheep's clothing. So they didn't fight the wolf in sheep's clothing, but they did end up being attacked by the Froghemoth. And this was before Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes had come out, so I didn't actually have the updated variant rules for the Froghemoth, but I did have someone else had run through and actually updated the rules for the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, so I used theirs with a little bit of a tone down. They managed to escape the Froghemoth because its challenge rating was way above their power level, with the assistance of a magical unicorn which was summoned by... Oh, that was right! They actually had their... one of the other players had actually come back, so the phase in, phase out mechanic from their dimensional shift. Crap, I've forgotten her character's name now. The elven wild mage, Eris. Eris had come back, so she was actually part of the group. So Eris, Wallflower, and Nuru were descending down because Selena wanted to stay with their mother, and Guy was uninterested. And Selena also wanted to do research because this ship had a very vast library database. So she got herself chipped and then got access to the library and was going through all of the library database in the ship, while the rest of the crew descended down to deal with the engine problem. Making their way through the engine, getting their way through. So what happened when they're in the Arboretum? The Froghemoth comes out and what's her name? Nuru immediately shocking grasps into the water. The water is zapped with electricity, and the Froghemoths actually get slowed down when they hit with electricity. They have electrical susceptibility. So good work there. And then Eris goes to use lightning bolt on it. Her magic goes wild and summons a unicorn. So the unicorn is underwater with the Froghemoth and with Wallflower, who's been grappled by the Froghemoth, and the Froghemoth is attempting to eat her. She actually just turned herself into a giant frog to swim across the lake, rather than actually turning into a giant eagle and flying across the lake. But whatever. This is what D&D is all about: making bad decisions and seeing what the results are. After this ridiculous encounter, using the assistance of the unicorn, they managed to get themselves onto the island of in the center of the lake, which has the biolabs with the genetic blanks, and they were also able to and making a deal with the robots in the biolab for some fresh DNA samples, which they needed to do for their own DNA setups for their chips, but also because Nuru at this stage was actually a doppelganger, um, the the genetics robot was able to use her DNA to help spawn a new series of blanks because all of the other blanks had perished because the power had been cut during the crash, as well as uh, just through mismanagement with an error within the computer. So all of the blanks had perished. So in order to resurrect the crew, he needed a fresh doppelganger DNA sample, and fortunately, Nuru was one. So he took a sample of her DNA as well as the DNA of the other two members in case they died, to be able to bring them back from the dead. Making their way into the engine room, which was below, was the boss battle, as it were. And once they got in there, the level directly below the arboretum was actually the cargo bay, which was flooded. They had to swim their way through that area, and then when they got through to the cargo hatch, they were able to get, or the maintenance hatch, I should say, they were able to get to the engineering level. The engineering level has the time drive in it, which was malfunctioning. So the way that I'd run that one was that I had different tiles, and each of the tiles was a different area. And every few turns, I rolled a d6 and I swapped two d6s, and I swapped those two rooms. There were 6 rooms. The room with the engine specifically in it never changed, but the other rooms would actually shift about the place. So they had to deal with this weird puzzle while they were fighting, or at least attempting to work out what was wrong with the engine. Um, the other element that I did as well was just for the sake of it, because the ship had actually crashed. It had crashed upside down, and the artificial gravity was only active on certain floors. So it was active on the first floor. It wasn't active on the engineering deck. The two bottom floors, the gravity wasn't functioning, which was why the floor before the engine room was flooded, because all of the coolant for the engine had leaked out and had flown into this area and completely flooded the area. So what they needed to do was restore gravity to the engineering deck and the cargo deck, or at least just the engineering deck, and then find a way to flush the engines with coolant to cool them down in order to shut them down. Because if they shut them down while they were overheating, it would have caused a catastrophic explosion. The ship would go, and so would most of the continent. So it was a pretty high stakes scenario. The other element that I threw into it was the alien queen. And so, fighting valiantly against the alien queen, they managed to destroy it as well as one of its minions, because it had only managed to find one live subject. So there was a single alien drone. It fought both of these. They fought these things. They took it out. The drone I just used for the actual xenomorph alien. I used the stats for a black dragon wormling. So that was what it was, and then it was I think a young black dragon is what I used for the alien queen. Again, just for their level to make it less of an insane challenge. But they valiantly fought against this alien threat, destroying the alien and managing to flush the engine with coolant and shut down the system. However, one thing that they did manage to do, or should I say, Nuru managed to do, was one of the rooms was the power transfer system, and all she needed to do was transfer power from one deck and transfer it to the engineering deck. She shut down the power, like literally cut the power on every single deck, because she wasn't really sure what she was doing, but she just decided, because like she had the readout from her load in, and because the Darius had downloaded like the engineering specs into her node, so she was able to understand what she needed to do. but she dumped all of the power from every single deck. So she shut down the Arboretum, she shut down the Biolab, she shut down everything except Darius, essentially, because Darius has his own independent power supply and cannot be shut down, because if you shut down the main computer of a deck, of a starship, bad things will happen. So she completely shut down the ship, and in doing so, she wiped all of the memory chips of the crew. So she wiped out all of the information that had been backed up. So there was no. So even though the biobot was creating new blanks, he no longer had the memory chips to reconstitute the crew. So whoops. Anyway, so but this wasn't discovered until way, 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 way later. So destroying the alien queen, saving the ship, saving the continent, they made their way back up to the main deck, because that now that the time drive was no longer functioning, they were able to repurpose the power. So they were able to power up the ship um, fully without the need of the power transfer systems. And there was a very, very dead Froghemoth, because when she shut off the gravity on the Arboretum deck, it flew all the way up to the roof and then fell down and had impaled itself on one of the trees in the Arboretum. So they had managed to defeat all of the major threats within this ship, which they would come to know as the Equinox, and it would also become their main hub world, as it were, for quite a while. But unbeknownst to them, 3 years had passed on the outside, and when they emerged, shit had really hit the fan. And we will get to that in the next tale of